So in Chapter 9, we are moving into the creating of the Constitution. We are moving from ending the Revolutionary War to a period of the Confederation of the United States, this loose league of 13 independent nations bound together in a confederation, but the idea or the realization that this is not going to work. So a constitutional convention is called. This first page here, I want to call your attention to number 6 and 7, and the fledgling idealism of our founding fathers was sacrificed to what? And according to James Madison, who is considered the author of the Constitution, what would be worse than the great evil of slavery? So, what would be worse than slavery? And according to James Madison, not having a constitution would be worse. So let's take a look here. Why in this dawning democratic age did abolition not go further and cleanly blot out this evil of slavery from the fresh face of this new nation? Now the truth is, this fledgling idealism of the founding fathers was sacrificed to political expediency. So a fledgling idealism sacrificed to political expediency. And what do you think that means? Political expediency, getting something accomplished, is that sacrifice. So was slavery, or the abolition of slavery, sacrificed to achieve a constitution? Political expediency. So number 7, and we're talking about James Madison here. Number 7 asks, this young Virginian named James Madison says, a dismemberment of the Union would be worse. So if the Union falls apart because we do not have a strong central government embodied by the Constitution, the Union falls apart, that would be worse. That would be worse than the actual evil of slavery. As we move on in the chapter, I want to call your attention to Daniel Shay's Rebellion and the Horrible Specter of Anarchy on page 167 in your textbook. And in particular, I would like to look at the unbridled republicanism and civic virtue. So Daniel Shay's Rebellion, a bunch of farmers, and they were pretty upset with the fact that the banks were foreclosing upon them, and there's a lot of economic uncertainty, and so they bound together. And when the government called out the militia to put down this anarchy, this mobocracy, see if I can get this to work. When the government called out the militia to put down the mobocracy, they found out that the militia itself were a bunch of farmers. So it was difficult for the farmers to basically be part of the militia and part of the rebellion. So that was part of this unbridled republicanism. And so this is a great paragraph. It's very important. That civic virtue was no longer sufficient to rein in self-interest and greed. It had become undeniably evident. One skeptic sorrowfully lamented that some malignant disorder had seized upon our body politic, and that if republicanism was on too shaky a ground, maybe some of the panicky citizens even talked of importing a king to carry on where George had failed. So anyway, I think that's pretty important, kind of important part of this chapter. Then when we come to question number 28, Constitutional Convention, just wanted to make sure that point out that Many of our founding fathers were not present. Some of them were not present. Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Thomas Paine, Patrick Henry were not present. So Thomas Paine, here pictured, Thomas Paine was smelling a rat. He wrote very critically of these rich old white men getting together, put together a new constitution without the input of the people. Others that were not present. John Adams was not there. Of course, John Adams was in France with Thomas Jefferson. And of course, then this is a picture of Thomas Paine. But these two were in Paris at the time negotiating repayment of the debt that we owed France for helping us win the Revolutionary War. But they were not present at the Constitutional Convention, and many of the leaders felt like this was a bunch of rich old guys getting together to figure out how to get some of their money back that they had lent America to gain their independence. Now, when we get to this compromise section, there's a lot of important concepts, and I think you'll have more, well, I'll have more time to explain some of this with the PowerPoint, but the Great Compromise, I wanted to call your attention to that. Great Compromise was between New Jersey and Virginia, and it led to two chambers, a bicameral legislative branch in the United States Congress. So this is a picture here of the United States Congress building, Congressional building, and of course originally it wasn't this big, but you would have this U.S. Senate and the U.S. Congress in these two chambers. Today, chambers are much bigger. In the Congress, the United States House of Representatives has 400, so we're going to put down here 435 members. That's based on population. So Kansas has 4, and then the United States Senate has 100. And that's based on equal representation from each state. So you have 2 from each state. That equals 100. We'll spend some more time talking about that and all the various compromises leading up to the Constitution. And these compromises happened at the Constitutional Convention. In 1787, the adoption of the Constitution was summer of 1787, and then the first president, George Washington, was elected, and the Constitution was put into effect in 1788. So this last page, I have a chart, and I just wanted to kind of call your attention to this. This emphasizes the 3/5 compromise, and I wanted to look at some of the population. This is a population chart and the number of representatives at the very first Congress, and it takes into consideration this 3/5. So take a look at South Carolina in particular. In the population, you have a slave population of 107, non-slave population. So if you added these two up, that would be the total population of the state. But if you just do a quick mental addition here, you have 141,000, 107,000. You should have close to 248,000. But obviously you only take 3/5 of the 107. So that gives us the 206,000 as a total. Alright, similarly, you have the population of Virginia. So you add the 450,000 and 292,000, basically should have something close to 750,000, but you only take 3/5 of the slave population. That's why that's the total number of that's the total population you count to get the 19 reps or the 6 reps. Also, it's interesting to take a look at the number of slaves in South Carolina. You have 107,000 slaves and 141,000 non-slaves. I would imagine any given time that some of those non-slaves would get kind of nervous when they in fact almost are outnumbered by slaves. But that's an important kind of number crunching with the 3/5 compromise. We'll look a little bit more at that with the PowerPoint lecture as well. Then on this last page here, just a couple of short questions, but kind of emphasizing this idea of the laggard states, and these are the last states to actually ratify the Constitution. And so these are a couple. This image here, We the People. This is the Constitution. This is a great picture here of the signing of the Constitution, the final ratification of the Constitution. And then this is a great cartoon that should be in your textbook as well. But I want you to take a look at the way the pillars are falling, the laggard states, in particular these two. So the Constitution says that you only need 9 out of 13 states to ratify the Constitution. So when you count them up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The Constitution technically should be ratified at this point, but we know that the Constitution would not work. The country would not survive if Virginia and New York did not ratify the Constitution. Therefore, it was extremely necessary for these two states to join. In order to help in that process, and these two states here, North Carolina and Rhode Island, were the last to finally join. Now, in order to help with this process, or to help with convincing New York and Virginia to join, it's very important for the Federalist Papers these Federalist Papers written by Hamilton, Madison, and John Jay. These were written anonymously, but those are the three authors, and those Federalist Papers were written with the idea of trying to convince the delegates or the legislators in Virginia and New York to approve or ratify the Constitution. If you have any questions regarding this homework assignment, please don't hesitate to email or give me a call.